Hi, I'm Charles Gallup, President of Vision New England. I want to share with you some framing around what we're seeing God do in New England that I thought might be helpful to you. We've been talking for a number of years about how God is doing something different here. And I heard that when I first got to this role. In the last couple of years, I'm seeing things that are very different. And the way I categorize it is the pattern is different. It's not just different and unusual. God's always doing different. But the actual patterns we're seeing are very different. It's people showing up in churches with no human invitation and being there every week. It's young people sitting for multiple services every Sunday and visiting each other at midweek programs during the week. It's tons of young teenagers starting their own manifestations of church, and 100 even in one case are showing up for it. It's just very different. And I think you may have seen, we've done some work asking people if there's some numerical data that would back this up. And we've seen baptism data through the roof in New England compared to other parts of the country. So God is doing something very different here. The question is what? And I thought this framing might be helpful. I've gone back and looked at the past great awakenings. And to be clear, I am not saying there is awakening going on. But I've gone back to the last three awakenings to see if we could see patterns. God works in patterns. And so typically, if you look at them, you see a pattern of renewal, revival, awakening in that sequence. Now, awakening never comes before revival, revival never before renewal, but renewal doesn't have to lead to revival, revival doesn't have to lead to awakening. If revival and awakening come, those are pure moves of God. But let me give you some definitions that might be helpful. Renewal, without getting into various different theologies and how the Holy Spirit works, but just to try and keep it as simple to have a conversation. Renewal is when the people of God start living the way God called us. It's that simple. Revival is when renewal has happened so significantly that the world sees it and people start getting saved in numbers we've never seen before. That's revival, people coming to life. Awakening happens when the revival has been so long and pervasive that the systems and structures of society start to change because there's so many Christians leading in places that are influential. So we've had great awakenings. They're right from New England, or where New England played a very big role, but that's the pattern. Now, I'm not saying we're in awakening. I'm not saying we're in revival. I'm not even saying we're in renewal. But maybe we're at the beginning of renewal, or maybe there's some part of renewal going on. I've looked at those awakenings to say, well, what are the hallmarks of renewal? And typically there's some things going on in renewal. There are leaders who are coming up with a shared theological vision of what the problem is. Sin, for example. In our case, it might be that we recognize we're not very good at making disciples. Doesn't mean no one is and no one's growing, but hundreds of leaders around New England have affirmed that as something they think God is saying to the church. Maybe that's it. There is collaborative prayer, typically led by lay people, typically led by women, that starts to grow around the region. We've had a lot of prayer ministries around New England. There's spiritual formation happening. And so think about Weston, there was an intense focus on spiritual formation. And because we're being formed spiritually, we start to live missionally. We start to live differently. That's the renewal part. And then that spreads across broad and dense networks. So that infrastructure ends up being in place so that when something happens on Cape Cod, people know about it. And the flames move around New England through those networks because now suddenly something's happening in Springfield and they have a frame of reference. And that gets people excited and engaged and more serious about God. And suddenly we see something happening in Danbury. That's the kind of broad and dense networks that happen in renewal and facilitate it. And we see that we start to plan for the future and we start to build institutional support. And so many of our colleges came out of Awaken, that we're trying to build leaders for the future. And so economic support comes out of it too. And so if we look at Vision New England's role in what we do, again, I'm not saying we're in renewal, but I think it's interesting that without planning it, Vision New England has hit on almost all of those spots. And so we have been part of helping leaders craft what might be that shared theological problem statement and solution, making disciples. We have a prayer leader now in New England who's working with prayer ministries and churches around New England to create more a collaborative New England-wide prayer. We have a leader in place who is doing spiritual formation and helping people live missionally. We have been building for years and are now investing in even more of it, these broad and dense networks around New England based on affinity and based on region. So we line up to all those pieces of renewal. So we're helping to build the infrastructure necessary for renewal. So that if God is calling us that, if God is going to move in the church that way, we're ready. And so would you join me in that? I would ask you to do three things. One is pray, but that is the kind. And I would ask you to, whether it's you personally or your church, engage with regional networks and prayer ministries and start your own prayer ministry. Or start praying collaboratively as churches in the region, not just across New England, but within a region, a geographic region of where you are, Greater Portland, Greater Manchester, Dartmouth, the Upper Valley. And would you support our mission by going to our website, visionnewengland.org, clicking on donate, because we need the resources to build this infrastructure that God might move.